I knew of a baby who was aborted at 28 weeks who weighed over 2 pounds.
Did that baby survive the abortion attempt?
A little while, yeah.
And they left that baby to die
Yeah.
at 28 weeks old?
They never assessed the babies after they were born.
Jill Stanek, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Lila, for having me.
So I'd love to hear your story about how you first encountered abortion.
Sure, I went to work at Christ Hospital on the southwest side of Chicago. Not knowing that it was involved in abortion, I never would have thought so with the name of the hospital. But I went to work in my capacity as a labor and delivery nurse one night and received 2 terrible blows. One was finding out that the hospital was involved in late-term abortion. I'd worked in the department for a year and didn't even know what was going on all around me. And the second was finding out that the method of abortion that the hospital used, called induced labor abortion, sometimes resulted in babies being aborted alive, and if they were aborted alive, they were shelved to die in the hospital's soiled utility room. I didn't have to participate because I was pro-life, but one night a nurse friend was taking a little abortion survivor to the soiled utility room to die, and when she told me what she was doing, I couldn't bear the thought of him dying alone. He'd been aborted because he had Down syndrome. He was about 21 and a half weeks old. He was about the size of my hand, and he didn't move very much, using all of his energy, attempting to breathe. At that time, he wouldn't have lived even with help, but it was a life-changing event. He lived for 45 minutes, and I'd known what was going on at Christ before then, but after I held that baby, I just had to do something that propelled me into the pro-life movement.
How did you first find out that Christ Hospital was committing abortions?
By accident. It was in report. They said that they were committing a mid-trimester labor induction. That was, their code for a late-term abortion, and that was the first I ever knew that it was going on there. I wasn't told ever. When I applied to work at the hospital, when I went to the department, I was never told. I just stumbled on it.
Do you know what justifications were used by hospital for these late-term abortions, including of babies with disabilities?
They had been doing these for 20 years with no policy whatsoever, but I knew that they were aborting babies with non-fatal handicaps like Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, fatal handicaps like anencephaly, no brain. Selective reduction, in the event a mom was carrying twins or more, they would offer to reduce the pregnancy, and also for rape incest.
And this was legal in the state, as it is in many states?
Yes, it was determined. The Attorney General of Illinois was brought in and did an investigation and said Christ Hospital wasn't violating any law whatsoever. After I went public, a bill was introduced in the federal level called the Born Alive Infants Protection Act, which protected abortion survivors from just being shelved to die or killed outright. And that same bill was introduced in the state of Illinois.
Was the first baby that you saw that was an abortion survivor that little boy with Down syndrome?
Yes.
And did you learn from other nurses or staff there about other children that had been left to die? Were there stories that were going around?
Oh, yes. In fact, when I testified on the federal level, another nurse at the hospital testified with me. And she testified of finding a live aborted baby laying naked next to the sink in the soiled utility room once, one to find a live aborted baby laying naked on the scale. I heard stories from nurses who were in the room directly, for instance, of one mom didn't know that her baby could be aborted alive. She wasn't fully informed. And when her baby came out alive, she screamed because not only was he alive, but he didn't appear to have the physical defects that she'd been told he was going to have, which is why she aborted. So she screamed for someone to help her baby. The nurse ran to the neonatal unit, grabbed the neonatologist, and he came running back. He assessed the baby, and then he had to tell the mom, there's nothing I can do for your son because he was born too soon. The mom was so traumatized, she had to be tranquilized, and it was left up to this little guy's grandma to rock him for the only half hour that she would ever spend with him. Just heard many stories such as that. I could go on.
There have been babies that have survived and lived, born as young as 21 weeks, 5 days, or it might even be 4 days. They've set records. And many neonatal intensive care units won't care for children that young, but some will. Were all these children less than 21 weeks and 5 days?
No, and as an aside, Christ Hospital was a level 3 mother-baby care institution, meaning all other hospitals in the area sent their very sick babies to Christ for care. So that was ironic. But no, I knew of a baby who was aborted at 28 weeks who weighed over 2 pounds.
Did that baby survive the abortion attempt?
A little while, yeah.
And they left that baby to die
Yeah.
at 28 weeks old?
They never assessed the babies after they were born. The Born Alive Act said, any baby being born was to be treated just like a wanted baby. But this wasn't happening there. If your baby was wanted and you delivered at 23 weeks, there was a team of 4 specialists that were sent over from the unit to specifically care for that little baby only. But if that baby wasn't wanted, abortion survivor, it was just left up usually to the resident because, attending physicians. I worked midnights, so physicians were gone. So it was usually left up to the residents and nurse to take care of these babies, but they weren't assessed.
And some of these, as you're describing, as old as 28 weeks, so viable with care, they're left naked on a stainless steel operating table or naked on a shelf. How typically were these babies left to die in their last moments?
Well, they all were, in one way or another. Parents were offered the chance to hold these babies, and most times they didn't. And then it was just up to staff, and if staff didn't have time, then they were shelved in the soiled utility room. And eventually I went public, after I held that baby.
But when you say shelved, what does that mean? What was done specifically to that baby when they were shelved?
One nurse told me, she said, well, Jill, at least I put my babies in the warmer when, I take them to the utility room. So optimum care would have been to provide comfort care, what they called. But that wasn't always the case, as my colleague testified.
Meaning they were left cold, naked in some
Sometimes,
cases?
yeah.
Was there any sense of how long sometimes these little ones would survive, just left alone to die like that?
My experience was between 1/4 and 1/3 survived for a time. For as short as a few minutes, one lived almost as long as an 8-hour shift.
Alone, dying. Patricia Sandoval, thank you for being here. You have an incredible story as well. Can you share briefly your experience with abortion?
The first time I was a victim of abortion was in the 6th grade. The sexual educators came to my school to talk to us about abortion, about safe sex, and it was all a lie. And I say that it was the day my innocence was robbed, my purity. They told us abortion was a woman's right. It was her body, it was her choice. So at the age of 12, when I left school that day, I was pretty much pro-choice and found myself with 3 unwanted pregnancies at the age of 19 in a 1.5-year span. And I really believed that being pregnant would destroy my dreams and goals that I had. I was a straight A student. I had so many things to look forward to, and I thought with each pregnancy that my life would be over. And I was never told the truth about abortion, never was told about post-abortion syndrome. And after each abortion, I suffered severe post-abortion syndrome, and so did my partner.
And these abortions, just to understand, you're having them at 19 years old. What kinds of abortions were they, and how far along were you in your pregnancies?
The first one, I was 4 months pregnant, and the last 2, I was about a month pregnant, 4 weeks.
And what was that like, that first abortion that you had?
The first abortion was difficult because I felt shame when I walked into that abortion clinic. There's something inside of you that says this is not okay, this is wrong, but then you justify it, right? Because you're so desperate. And I felt relief, but at the same time, I felt shame. But I thought that I walked out of that abortion clinic as a free woman, liberated, empowered, and truly after that is when my problems started. And I never connect all the symptoms I was suffering emotionally, mentally, and even physical damage in my womb. I never connected all those emotions and what I was suffering with the post-abortion syndrome. And still thinking abortion was good, I wanted to work for Planned Parenthood. So I applied at a job at a facility in California, Planned Parenthood facility, as a receptionist. When they learned during my interview that I was post-abortive and that I was bilingual, they hired me illegally as a back office nurse. They told me that 95% of their abortion patients were immigrants that spoke Spanish. They didn't speak any English, and they had never had anybody speak Spanish at their facility, which is very dangerous because none of the consent forms, none of their material was translated into the Spanish language, which is obviously unsafe. And I learned the truth about abortion. It's like the veil was ripped out of my eyes when I had to assist for the first time the abortionist, a 15-year-old patient. She was 3 months pregnant. I stood behind the abortionist's shoulder, and I was really, truly never trained. They just kind of threw me into the procedure. The young girl was crying. She was kicking, and I was instructed before the abortion to ignore all tears because women want other options. Some of them don't want to have abortions, but abortion is their only option. I was trained to never use the word baby, mother, father, he, she. I couldn't even use the word fetus because even fetus gave human dignity. And I was trained to never let them see the screen on their ultrasound. And when I witnessed that first abortion, what I witnessed was like a violent scene. I thought that he would retrieve the cannula because she was kicking, but he didn't. He kept going. And then it kind of dawned on me that he was doing this blindly, this procedure, and it didn't look safe. And then I had to be the abortionist eyes. So I had to grab the biohazard bag that was attached to the vacuum machine, the machine that they use. I went into this hidden room behind the doors of Planned Parenthood, and there was a big Petri dish in front of me. I was instructed to dump the contents inside that Petri dish, and I really thought and I believed that I was going to look for a sack of tissue because that's what I was told before my 3 abortions. But what I found was a baby just in pieces, and I had to look for the 5 body parts. And as my coworker held each little body part up to the light, I can contemplate all the detail, that the baby was completely formed. I even remember seeing a little hair growing out of the baby's leg. But when I looked at the 5th part and I contemplated the face, I remember seeing the little eyes, the nose, the ears, and the baby's mouth wide open as if this baby was screaming. But nobody can hear this baby's voice, completely voiceless. And she puzzled back this baby's body together, and she said the abortion was successful, the patient can go home, and she just threw that little baby in the garbage. And we just collected babies after each abortion. And after the end of the day, we basically tied the garbage bag and we kept them in a big freezer, and they were converted into blocks of ice until a biohazard would come in monthly to discard them.
How late term did the clinic do abortions?
They did up to 20 weeks, but the day that I ran out and I was horrified, I was to assist a young girl that was 24 weeks pregnant with twins, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I left.
So the books basically, or the advertising said 20 weeks. Sometimes they'd go beyond that, it sounds like. And when you were in that room and assisting with abortions, some of these babies would be fully formed. These are later term abortions, so you're dealing with a baby that's 20 plus weeks old.
Yes, even when I would look for the body parts, I could tell if it was a little girl or a little boy because I could see their genital area. And that's when I realized they don't care about women. They don't care about the youth. And what about these little women that are being aborted and killed? You know, where are their rights?
How many abortions do you think you helped participate in?
Probably about 50.
And the last one was the twins.
I did not participate in that one, and that's when I ran out. I would cry every day. I didn't understand how my coworkers, how the abortionist, how they were basically working as robots. It looked like they didn't have any emotion. It looked like they were just trying to survive working there. But I could say that working behind the doors of Planned Parenthood is horrifying.
You both worked as nurses. Planned Parenthood had you hired illegally, it sounds like. You were working at a Christian hospital, and both were committing abortions on babies 20 weeks and sometimes even older. Jill, you had mentioned that there was a time when you decided to become a whistleblower. What happened in the aftermath?
I went public, and Christ Hospital has never denied what I said was true, never sued me because they can't. But after I went public about a year later, I'd been going around the country by this time being asked to speak and saying that they were shelving babies to die in the soiled utility room, and so they created what they called the comfort room. This was a small, nicely decorated room complete with a first photo machine in case parents wanted professional pictures taken of their aborted babies, baptismal supplies in case they wanted their babies baptized, and a foot printer and baby bracelets in case they wanted keepsakes of their aborted babies. And I took pictures of the comfort room. They kept it locked, but I got in one night and took pictures, and you can see them. They're on the internet, Christ Hospital Comfort Room, and that's one of the reasons I eventually got myself fired.
And then, Patricia, in the aftermath of you leaving after that abortion where they were committing an abortion on twins, and it was so traumatizing, it sounds like, for you, what happened in your aftermath?
My aftermath was the pain was so great that I sought to console myself with drugs, and I became a homeless drug addict from the pain of knowing that I was a murderer, basically, and that I was lied to and deceived, and that I murdered my own children. And I lived this life of darkness on the streets. I lived with the cartel, and I was rescued off the street one day when I thought I was gonna die, and I found healing.
What are you doing now?
Now I travel the world, telling my story, offering women and men, because men need healing too, healing after abortion, there's hope, and I host a pro-life show on television.
Jill, what are you doing now?
I'm retired. I worked for Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America for several years and then retired a year ago.
I will just say I know because you've helped Live Action over the years, but you spent many years involved in pro-life advocacy after you left Christ Hospital.
It's still in our hearts. It always will be.
Do you have any questions for each other about your experiences?
I do. You mentioned that you had to piece together 5 parts of the body, and I'm curious to know what were they looking for to make sure that you had everything?
They had to make sure there was 5 pieces,
Yeah,
right?
what
So it
were-
was the arm, the 2 legs.
The torso and
Right, so it was the head, the 2 arms, and the 2 legs. They had to make sure the whole baby was complete, that nothing was left behind, because it could result in an infection, and the woman can actually die if any little tissue or any little body parts are left.
And then when you were part or you saw the 20-week abortions, were those D&E abortions too?
I don't remember. I don't remember that. A lot of my memory's blocked, but a lot of my coworkers would assist the 20-week ones. I would assist the first trimester. I was the one looking for the body parts on those babies.
Do you know if those second trimester ones were dismemberment abortions?
I think so, yeah.
So it sounds like at Christ they were delivering the baby
Right.
intact, alive. And
No,
then
this was dismemberment.
live dismemberment at Planned
Yes.
Parenthood.
There was one case of conjoined twins, and induced labor abortion didn't work. And so they had to do a D&E abortion. And even the pro-choice nurses didn't want anything to do with it. Somebody had to draw, the short straw. It wasn't pleasant even for them.
Just wanted to ask you what you felt when you held that baby in your arms.
Well, it was a surreal experience. It's like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I'm in this world. And it was more of that. I just remember sitting at the nurse's station and holding him in a blanket, and another nurse came by and went, "Oh," and she picked up the blanket and went, "Oh," and put the blanket back, and then the charge nurse told me I should probably go sit in a private place. So I treated him like a human after he was gone, tied his arms together with a little string, wrapped him in a shroud, took him to the morgue, because they knew they were dealing with a human being. But the whole thing was just traumatic, and it's what really moved me forward, and still to this day, wanting to defend that little guy, his honor.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.